We found that through the pandemic, while this has not grown significantly, certainly it has been a stable source of revenue. For the future years, we've removed the proration from the state formula and left our transportation flat. While I think a report from MASSA stated that next year's Missouri budget may need a proration factor, that may be one of the revenue sources we will need to adjust as we find out more. Further, in other local, we do project a loss in the Parkway Rockwood Community Ed program for next year as well. With that, we have not had a revenue estimate in here, but rather we have it in our financials as an expenditure. And this may adjust by the time we present the budget to the Board of Education. We know that we are still discussing what summer will look like with some of the enrichment programs. So perhaps as we move further in the future months, we will see how that is impacted. We have also estimated the gradual reduction of the voluntary transfer program. So we receive tuition for our students that reside in the city and attend our schools. And we know we do have a gradual phase out of that program. The revenues in the next year have also been adjusted for food service. We're planning to go back to normal participation in local funding. The stimulus and CARES funding has also been removed from next year's budget. Altogether, you will see that we are projecting an overall decrease in revenue, operating revenue of 0.65%. In the future years, a very slight growth as well, which is greatly flattened by the growth of the property tax revenue. And we will be working, sorry.
Sorry, Patty. We'll be working on the next budget component, which is developing the expenditure budgets. With salary and benefits making up more than 85% of our budget, a large part of our time is looking at enrollment, staffing, and benefits. Our buildings will be developing their budgets as well as our program directors. With using zero-based budgeting, the first step is for everyone to set their goals for the next year. Once the goals have been set, it is our work to develop the budget that supports those goals. And I would say we've been very successful in implementing zero-based budgeting over the last few years. It's been great. Patty and Dr. Marty have really pushed it, and I've been amazed by the way it's been adopted across the district. And to hear people that probably didn't know the term zero-based budgeting now saying it, it's impressive. I enjoy it. So on the next slide, here's our breakout of our operating expenditure budget. As mentioned, our salaries and benefits make up 85%. Our benefit costs over the last few years have been very stable, with credit to our wellness program and to our near-site clinic. This year, we are experiencing numerous individuals with high claim costs, especially prescription drugs, on our benefit side. Even with this, we are not going to increase our insurance for the upcoming year. In addition, we have heard that PSRS/peers will not be increasing the contribution rate. We do know that this current year we did have an increase in workers' compensation insurance, which is part of the benefit component. This, along with the increase in salaries, will be factors in our increased benefit costs. Again, the next slide, we'll start with our enrollment projections. One of the most important factors in salary planning is enrollment. In elementary, our staffing is directly correlated with enrollment. As with this year, we will be offering virtual campus and in-person learning. As you can see, we anticipate an increase in enrollment for next year, followed by a slight decrease in the following year. And then on our next enrollment slide, this chart depicts our enrollment by level. Elementary shows a slight increase next year. High school enrollment is projected to have a slight decrease, and middle school is projected to remain essentially flat. And then, further, we have our enrollment projection by residential populations and our students that reside in the city of St. Louis. As you can see, we have included a reduction in our students from the VIC program. Okay, and then let Patty talk about our staffing goals.
So as we approach staffing and building that budget, I know Dr. Bogus and Dr. Cohen will be meeting with principals, et cetera, to firm up their staffing based on enrollment. But included in our planning, because we do have that slight increase in enrollment, is an FTE increase of 3 new positions. Over the past few years, we've had reductions in many of the operation departments and middle school also as part of the comprehensive staffing study. Many operation staff positions were realized when the employee retired and or left the district, and the job duties were realigned with other positions mostly. This helped with the budget in order to align with our goals for our students. So our goals for increased staffing included the opening of McKelvey Primary, so staffing recommendations from the Mental Health Task Force, and staffing for personalized learning. The budget projections for next year include new positions for McKelvey Primary, which include the counselor and some other support positions. It also includes the suggestions from the Mental Health Task Force. They completed their work last year and had recommendations for additional care coordinator positions to be added. Dr. Matheson has worked with the group, and they have suggested that this will be hired at a ratio of 1 per 800 to 850 students. Last year, we added 5 positions at the middle school. This year, we added 4 positions. We were able to take care of those positions with CARES Act funding. So for the upcoming budget, we have projected the need for 6 additional positions to bring that total support to 15 positions. So decisions have been made for personalized learning as well. The elementary programming is in full gear at Sorrento Springs. The decision for secondary has been modified and will be slightly different from the original plan. The new plan is designed to use existing teachers to supplement the program and not hire additional staff. It is still in the planning stage, and there's not a specific date for this implementation. As you know, last year we completed the 3-year negotiation with the PNEA, and this year we have the negotiations with our nurses, our custodial warehouse, and our newest group, our maintenance and grounds. So what we do know is our salary increases for our teachers over the upcoming years, and that is a 3.14% for 2021 and a 3.04% for 22-23. At this point, we have not determined the increases for the other employee groups. Prior to zero-based budgeting, we've projected the expenditures for this next year and the upcoming years. We have input the changes noted from the positions and the estimated salary increases. We've included the increases for the benefit costs as well. You will notice that we have provided estimates for the purchase services and supplies as well. These include an estimated increase for our Chromebook refresh and the expense of the Parkway Rockwood Community Ed program. In the following years, we've removed the loss of the Parkway Rockwood Community Ed from fiscal year 23, fiscal year 24, and fiscal year 25. You may also see the amount that's shown in red. That represents the amount that we still need to identify as reductions. So once again, our zero-based budgets are not in yet. So our budgets may come in and meet that goal. This goal is needed for us to provide a budget that has a growth of the 0.25% fund balance growth. This can happen in several ways, but we are hopeful that our administrators will be developing their zero-based budgets for only their true needs. Once budgets will be turned in, negotiations completed, we'll have a better idea of whether or not we will need to work with our budget managers to make additional adjustments. As far as future years, I think we need to proceed with caution. Our property tax collection and growth are our largest concern. At this point, it's still too early to predict how the pandemic will impact us in the long term. Here's our recap for our operating fund balance. And our recap, as you can see, we've not projected a transfer into the capital projects fund in the upcoming years. At this time, there is sufficient funding to withstand our current level of spending in the capital projects fund. So that includes in-house facility projects that are done that are non-bond related. It also includes our bus purchases year by year. In the years following 2025, though, we will need to provide funding into the capital projects fund if we're unable to increase that fund with our recoupment levy. And this slide is one of Dr. Marty's favorite slides. So of course it tells our story of the last recession where way too quickly our fund balances declined. And since that period of time, we have been increasing our fund balances. We have successfully, for the first time since that great decline, survived a year without needing to borrow any TANs. This is a huge accomplishment. Certainly, we need to ensure that we are doing what is needed so that we do not put ourselves back into that predicament again. As you can see, we are, very narrowly, projecting a very slow growth of our fund balances. Last year, when we had the big increase in our collection rate, as you can see, we allowed that to go to our fund balances as well. So that helped us to improve our fund balances. And just because we had additional revenue, we didn't go ahead and add additional expenditures as well. Next slide, please. This is a slide that Brian created in the spring, and it gives a whole nother aspect of our story, if you will, with our fund balance variances and then the changes in our revenue. So certainly in the years where there were declines in revenue, we had pretty steep declines in that fund balance percentage as well. And then the same for those years that we had the large increases. You could see those major bumps in that fund balance percentage as well. And at this point in time, next slide, we open this up to any of your questions or any of your feedback.
Well, I'd just like to say I've been kind of holding my breath about the TAN, and if it was going to be needed. I know we have this conversation every end of November, beginning of December, and it's that time again. And I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to jinx this, but kudos to you and your staff and zero-based budgeting to get us to this point. That's a huge accomplishment. So that's just great. I did have a couple of questions on, we all know we don't know what's going to happen with tax collections. I still have my personal property tax I'll be mailing or doing online probably on December 31st, like I usually do. But when will we start to discover the true impact of that? At what point in the next calendar year will we start hearing about that?
So our first indicator certainly is going to be in February, early March, when we receive the protest report. So that would be a report that St. Louis County provides to us that gives us a breakdown of the current taxes that were just assessed and the protests that have been filed. So that's going to be one indication. A few years ago, when we knew that we had a collection issue, meaning a delay in taxpayers remitting their funding, their revenue, we found that out right in, was that March, Brian, I believe, when we were looking at our revenues and comparing those revenues that we received plus the report from the protest versus what, the taxes we had levied and budgeted. So certainly by that March timeline, we're going to at least know a gut feel of how our collections could end for the year.
Okay.
Now, I will say on a longer term projection, though, we won't know because there's such a backlog of the settlements from the prior year's protests. We really don't know the pace at which the state tax commission is going to be settling those cases. Are they going to do 2 years at once? Are we always going to be one additional year behind because of everything that happened in the spring? That is certainly still to be determined. But on our monthly reports from the county, we do see netted together the negative payments from prior years, which represent our paybacks, along with the positive receipts that we receive. But we only get that overall report by year. So it doesn't give us, totally our uncollected plus or minus that protest settlement, just the net figures by each year.
Okay, thank you. My other questions related to staffing goals. And have we started, I know the plan is to not increase. Have we started looking at how our staffing needs may change, increase or decrease with the virtual platform continuing in the next school year? And as we know, as we've seen this fall with either hybrid or in-person learning, when our secondary teachers are finding themselves having to teach both in person and students who are quarantined or simply not choosing to come to school, have we considered, or are we considering providing additional support for them, either through proctors or subs or teachers assistants or anything to give them some additional support?
So I can say pretty early on in this budget stage, we have looked at a model that is purely based on enrollment and then an FTE model. So as we begin planning, certainly those factors will go into it, but I can see that Dr. Beckner and Dr. Bogus have turned on their cameras, so perhaps they'll provide a little bit more insight, but those will be some of the things that we do need to have deeper conversations with as we're building out the expenditure budget.
I can speak about next year, and then Kevin, I'll let you speak to the other question. So, Mr. Todd, as we're looking at staffing for next year, normally during this time, we would be allocating staff percentages per building. We're looking at a more comprehensive by level staffing approach with all of the high school principals collectively looking at what staffing would look like on a virtual campus as well as in-person campuses. Similarly, with the middle school principals on the same regard. The elementary, I'll be working with Dr. Cohen with the elementary principals as we look to staff those, but until we know some solid numbers, we don't know exactly which direction to go, except for the fact that we know there will be a virtual campus need. Per an agreement with the NEA, we're working with Pat McPartland and a small group of people on a virtual task force to look at what that would look like next year for a virtual campus. If we're in still a time of COVID, there will be a need to still accommodate staff members by need as we move forward in staffing that virtual campus. If we are in a mode of a vaccine and employees are back to work, then we would need to come up with a plan to select a virtual campus teacher, which is not currently in any of our agreements. And so working with NEA and Pat McPartland will be key as we move forward, whichever way it goes. But we do have a fork in the road eventually, depending on, if we're still in a time of COVID with no vaccine to accommodate staff, or in a time where we can go ahead and open it up for a virtual campus and take applications from our staff members that want to do virtual.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, just like Patty is presenting her budget assumptions tonight, as we plan for virtual campus moving forward, we have to build off a set of assumptions that as we sit here on December 9th might or might not end up being correct. So For example, we assume that there's still going to be a large number of students who want a virtual campus. We're also assuming that we'll be in a place of more stability by August, meaning hopefully with Dr. Wallen and her team's work, we'll have a vaccine, that is being distributed or has been distributed. So hopefully we will see less ups and downs and need to change between settings. So we'll have more consistency. But again, we're just gonna have to build off those assumptions. And to Mike's point, we'll have to figure out our numbers. And then once we get that, be able to build forward from that. Is there anything else, Mr. Todd, from your question I can answer about current year?
No, that pretty well covers it.
The other thing I think we would probably, it's too early, but we'll have to look at the expense side. I mean, this year we've certainly not spent significant dollars with professional development travels. And there may be future changes in that regard too. We're seeing more and more. We just had 30-some teachers attend a virtual national staff development conference moving forward, which is great because they could combine their attendance at a conference with still being in attendance here. I think, Dr. Beckner, you were one of the people that were part of that. So, I mean, that's going to change a little bit about how we look at expenses going forth too. And there'll be some other things that we've learned through this that we can do business a little bit differently. But we haven't talked a great deal about that. And it will have, some impact, and some of it could be cost savings and some of it could be just an adjustment of how we do business.
Any other questions for Patty or?
Patty, I take it that our growth of the fund balance is going to still be doable?
We're hopeful. I mean, that's how, that's why we spend so much time on revenue budget and adjusting there so that, truly we know where we're going to draw the line in the sand for the expenditure. So that's our target, is to have that 0.25% growth each year. We had a large growth last year, well over a 1%. So truly with our fund balance policy, it does allow that over a 3-year period, we could have a 0.75% growth. But I know with Brian and I have discussed it at length that it's much easier to just continue to budget at the 0.25% and not budget at that flat or a negative, just because in the following years that could be setting ourselves up for bigger cuts or bigger swings than necessary.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, in that case, thank you very much, Patty, Brian. Please extend our thanks to your team for getting through the audit, preparing the preliminary budget assumptions. We really appreciate all the time and effort that you all put into everything you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Next on the agenda, we don't have an item on the posted meeting. But Nikki, is this where I could move to call for a special meeting? Okay. Let's see. May I? What are we talking about? December 21st? Is that what everybody agreed upon? Would that work? Okay. 7 p.m.
Shortest day of the year. Let's keep that theme going.
Oh, that's true. All right. May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education call for a special meeting on Monday, December 21st, 2020 at 7 p.m. for the purpose of voting on a comprehensive learning plan for the second semester?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, that was easy. Next anticipated closed session will be held on January 5th, 2020. Details of the closed session will be posted within 24 hours of the anticipated meeting. We have no closed session to go into tonight, and so may I have a motion and a second to adjourn the regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you all for watching, those of you watching, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you. Hey, Patty.